Okay, recording has started. What all do I have to cover? Let's see. First of all, 1302, let's go to the class with Magnus Baraka. I wanted to point out to you guys that discussion post quizzes never pop up. So you see I'm on 2 different pages here. Discussion post quizzes, they never pop up until 12:30 on Thursdays, and they stay open through Sunday nights. Now, if you miss them, I've had some people tell me so far that they've missed them. I don't know if I addressed this the other day, but if you miss a quiz, you can email me and say, hey, I missed the quiz, and I reopen those on Friday all at once. So I go to like all the students who send me an email that says I missed a quiz, and I'll email back and say, hey, I've reopened it. And it stays open from that Friday to that Sunday, and that's all it stays open. The discussion post, if you say, hey, I missed a discussion post, then what happens is you email me, you let me know, that's fine. But I can't reopen those. Those don't reopen. The only time I can reopen them is in week 13, where I have a page set to reopen all of them at once. So in week 13, you'll be able to make up ones that you've missed, but not until then. And if you've told me ahead of time, like email me around the time when it happened, then you can have full credit for it. But if you didn't do that, you can't. So you have to email me when you've missed one, because if you don't email me when you miss one, then you won't have the opportunity to make it up. Let's see. Questions about that?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Launchpad still doing that thing, I think, where start your free trial automatically won't let you enter the code, but if you can figure out how to enter the code, that's great. Good job for you. Lesson videos, I did add what I think I talked about adding, which was for those students who needed it, tutorial how to format an essay in Microsoft Word, Google Docs, Blackboard. Did I already show you this the other day? Mm-hmm. So it was already on there the other day. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, okay. Fair enough. If you need it to help you submit, go ahead. If you want to resubmit because you realize you did it wrong based on the video you see, that's fine too. Let's see. Scroll. Somebody was asking me a question about grades through email and how it looks. I'll be honest with you, I don't know. Because y'all use an app, the Blackboard app, a lot of you use it. I don't have that app. And when I have had the app, it doesn't let me do anything as a teacher on there. Teachers have to basically do everything through like the website, but it lets you do stuff on the app. And it also lets you see your grades in the app. I don't have any grades, so I can't look at grades. So like, I have no idea what like the app looks like. And they don't really give any teachers training on like what everything looks like from the student side. So all I know is that Launchpad takes about 48 hours-ish to, and to keep in mind that may actually look like 3 days on a calendar. So like if you finish a like Launchpad quiz like at 9 p.m., but Launchpad automatically refreshes things like at 8:30 every day, and you were just past the refresh. And I don't know when it does the refresh every day. But it's 9 p.m. on like a Thursday, and you check on Friday where your grade is, and it's not there. And you check on Saturday where your grade is, and it's not there. And like it's 6 p.m. on Saturday, and you're like, listen, it's been like 48 hours, and I can't. Well, it hasn't really been 48 hours. It's been like 42, and so you're actually jumping the gun a little bit. So it just takes some time. But if you're doing them on Launchpad and you're finishing them and you're completing that circle, it's getting it. It just takes a while to port that over. So I wouldn't worry too much about it, even though it can be kind of shocking when you're like, I'm doing this, I'm not seeing the results. Especially right now in the free trial period where it won't let you see your grade book on Launchpad, is that right? So you can't see that you completed it. I mean, if you ever get really freaked out, you can text me, or not, no, do not text me. I don't even know how you would. Email me, and you can ask me, hey, can you check and make sure that these show that I've completed them? That way you have like a more of a eased mind about the Launchpad work that you're doing, and you know that you're not just wasting time.
It tells me if I finish.
What the heck is this? Guidelines for actively reading a text? Unassigned? What is this? This is Magnus Baraka sees this. What the heck is that?
Yeah, that was added like Monday, Tuesday. All of Launchpad is unassigned.
But I don't understand that.
Yeah, it like makes you, like before you can do the thing that actually is great, it like made you do like the stupid stuff before it that you didn't really need to do.
So I'm curious, when you went to it, did you go to Launchpad? Okay, every time you get done with something on Launchpad, do you close that window, come back to Blackboard, and then click on the next folder, and then click Learning Curve?
Yes.
And it's still making you go through all that silly stuff?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I have no control over
The
that.
first time I did it on the argument one, but after I did it on the whatever the next one is, it didn't do it again. Because I like closed it out because it kept making me like reread the notes and like type stuff on the notes page, and I was like, this is so stupid. I've never done that before. So I just skipped all the notes and just went to the. I don't know. It was really messed up. I was looking at it yesterday, but it didn't make me do it on the second one. It was just on the first one.
See, that's weird because I don't have those assigned. So.
That's what it said in the grade book. It was like unassigned, but it still made you like go through it when you opened it.
Really weird. So yeah, you may have some hoops to jump through. Those of you who haven't started that yet, you may have to like find clever ways around having to do stuff. But yeah, I'm hoping eventually it'll just be where you say learning curve, and it's going to let you just do the learning curve and not have to do this other stuff. I'm sorry about if it does make you. I don't really understand. But if that's what it does, that's what it does. I have no control over that aspect of it. What is this? No. Those are old. Those PowerPoints, by the way, those are old. If you look at those, we don't even use those. Now, assignments. I'm going to spend, the first thing I'm going to do today is, that we actually do, is assign the new essay that came out. And it's due week 5, day 2. So I want to make sure we have time to talk about that and read the sample essay, because I know I didn't read the sample essay on the other essay assigned, but it was because the concept is kind of easy. This one, the concept's a little more difficult. But I think reading the sample essay helps clarify it a little. Doesn't make it any easier when you do it yourself, but it makes understanding what you have to do easier. Instead of me talking so cryptically, I should just show you. Additionally, there's another file I'm going to open, this literary terminology for use. It's helpful to have access to like literary terminology, which I'll get to in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and open that now, and then I'll just show you in a minute where that could be useful. So are there any questions about this essay before I get started and going into it? I liked it earlier when somebody said no, and then I just got to keep going.
No.
Yes, thank you. So week 3, day 2, this is assigned. Week 5, day 2, it's due. This is called the critical analysis essay. You don't have to just write about fiction or drama or poetry for this one. However, you cannot write about drama because the only drama reading in this class is Antigone, and it's already the subject of evaluation synthesis 2. Additionally, as you'll see from this assignment, it's going to be very difficult to do Antigone anyway, because I ask you to take like the words that an author chose for a story and talk about why those words were chosen specifically. But in the case of Antigone, you're reading a translation from the Greek, so he didn't choose those words. Some translator did. So it'd be very difficult to argue that the author chose these words for this reason when the author didn't. But any other thing is fair game, with the exception of Rose for Emily, which is the sample essay story. Was there a question I saw? Yeah.
If we know Greek, can we do it?
If you know Greek and you chose a Greek line from Antigone, I guess I would allow it because the idea of it is very intriguing to me. So yes, if you know Greek. But then I don't know if you have to read the Antigone. You have to find Antigone in the original Greek text.
Yeah.
And hope that the original Greek text that you're reading, I mean, think about English and how if you read Shakespeare, that's pretty hard to understand. And then there's Beowulf, which is still considered Middle English, which that's hard to understand. Imagine like modern Greek is probably what you're learning. Maybe if it was ancient Greek, like if you were learning like Bible Greek.
Yeah.
So it's the Greek that would have been in the original texts. That actually might be pretty close because Sophocles wrote in 400 BC. So it's 400 years prior, so it's like the difference between now's English versus like 1600. It should be like the difference between now and Shakespeare. But just in Greek. So if you could pull it off, I'd be impressed. But I'm also going to be judging you just as harsh as I would normal students. So it's been like, well, you're supposed to throw me a bone here, but I'm not a bone thrower. I grade everybody equally, and I'm not gonna be like, oh, he did something harder, therefore grade him easier. No, that ain't how I roll, baby. I actually kind of creeped myself out when I just did that. So let's see. You could do any short stories, any poems, but honestly, I think when you hear me talk about this, you'll see that like poems, there's an added level of difficulty with poems that you might not want to mess with, so it might still be best to stick with the short stories. So pick a short story that's not Rose for Emily is, I think, your best goal. Now, what do you do with this? This will be complicated in the understanding of what I'm asking for, but I think once you get it, the concept is simple. It's how are you going to execute it that's difficult. Once you've picked a story, you'll write a critical analysis essay for a specific selection from that literary reading. The critical analysis should unfold or unpack the meaning and workings of a literary text by looking at a very small selection from the work, something like a sentence or a phrase, or in the case of poetry, maybe even a word. But you're not merely going to choose like the title of the story because it's a little too easy. If somebody argued that the sentence that uses the words "good man is hard to find" is quite important to the themes and subject matter of "good man is hard to find," I mean, it's hard to argue against that because it's the title. But other stuff is fair game, just not stuff where like the title is in the words. So you're going to try to figure out, like, for example, down here, everybody's paper will be structured in this way. You'll have the title, the work that it came from, and then this person chose this little sentence or portion of a sentence from Rose for Emily, and they're going to talk about why that is very, very important to the establishment of theme and what all this sentence could mean to the story's themes, purpose, the story itself. Did anybody take AP English in high school? If your teacher was a good one, you did this a lot because this was what was on the AP test. Was this kind of analysis. It would give you like a line and say, write a whole essay about this line.
Yeah. No.
If you had a bad one who just sort of did stuff, yeah, it might not so much. But that's one of the reasons I get not very many people have said they've done this type of essay before, so not many people have an advantage. So I feel confident with that. So they pick this sentence and they've got to break it down and show why it's important to the establishment of theme in the story. Oh, and we'll talk about this next week a little bit, but theme is essentially like the equivalent of a thesis in a story. Theme is like, here's what the story is trying to say, and a thesis is like, here's what the essay is trying to prove. So it's kind of like when an author is trying to get some message across, whether or not the author even is aware of what that message is, what the purpose of that narrative that they're giving you. That's the theme. And there might be multiple themes going on. Theme is, though, not synonymous with subject in literature. That actually you would call, like, I think a motif or sometimes even mood, depending on how you use it, but that's for later. So you pick a selection from the story and analyze it. So you're going to have a strong thesis for this paper, but the thesis will be the same basically for everybody. It's going to be that this selection that has been picked matters in this way and for these reasons. You'll try to provide compelling thoughts about the themes and subject matter, as well as show true insight through closely reading that small piece. So you're going to try to think of original ways in which this sentence might be trying to construct meaning. Back in my day, we used to call this we know what BS is, right? Some students say, I'm really good at BSing my way through papers. Well, sometimes this paper can involve a lot of BS. A lot of sounding like you know what you're talking about when you're really kind of making a case for something you're not 100% sure of. But it could be true. And that's a lot of what this essay is. It's could you make a case for it? And if you could, go for it. Doesn't necessarily have to be something you're 100% sure of. So in this paper, I don't want you analyzing the author's ideas like you did in the last paper from a personal standpoint. So not I agree with the author and what he says here, or I feel the same way about this as the author does. That's not relevant here at all. This is supposed to be cold, analytical. The author could be essentially arguing for something immoral, like saying that people shouldn't be allowed to have a part in their own democratic process. We should all be under dictators. And you would say the author's using this sentence to establish why dictators are important. You're not going to judge the author for saying dictators are great. You're just going to say this is the sentence that shows his beliefs on that. So you're going to be kind of objective, analytical, not personal and emotional, a lot unlike the last paper. And in the other paper, you could kind of be broad and talk about everything. You can do that here, but you have to be doing that in the context of all relating it back to this sentence you chose and saying this sentence is important because of the different things it does with different parts of the story. And I like to think of it as a dissection, okay? The other paper was like looking at a body, a person, and saying, I like that. That's good. Check out that arm. That's a muscular arm. I also think arms should be muscular, just like that. This paper is like a dissection, where you reach inside and you go, what is like look at this little thing, the pituitary gland. Without this, the body couldn't live because of the way it affects hormones that affect like the secretion of certain things in the body, and like without it, the whole body dies. So you're arguing like this sentence is very important to making the body work, whereas the other one you're saying, oh, I like the body, or the body's kind of cool, or look at this other part of the body, you know. So it's way different in like the focus you have. And I don't want people going so easy with the sentences where that's one of the reasons I want you to pick the title, because that's the equivalent of saying, I think the head is important to the body. Duh. I mean, if you take the head off a body, it can't live. It's pretty important. And that's the same with the title. Usually people pick titles fairly importantly. Additionally, I kind of would like people to stay away from, if at all possible, the obvious sentences in the story. I mean, you can pick them if it's easier for you. Just keep in mind that a lot of people might do that. Like if you went with the good man is hard to find story and you picked the sentence that said, she'd have been a good woman if there'd been someone there to shoot her every day of her life. That's a very famous sentence in literature. So if you pick that sentence, know that other people might. And it's going to make your job a little bit harder because you'll not only have to do well, you'll have to kind of stand out when I subconsciously compare you to the other people who wrote about the same thing. Because let's be honest, teachers are humans, and if I'm reading an essay and I've read 4 other essays on the same topic, without realizing it, I'm going to be comparing yours to theirs because I've already read one on this. So that might make your job more difficult. And picking a sentence like that, too, is kind of like arguing the heart is important to the function of the body, or the lungs, where it's like, obviously, if you can't take in air, you can't breathe, you die. Heart can't pump blood, you die. But somebody might say, like, you know, a pituitary gland, you're like, I don't even know what that is. What does that do? It patoots, you know. That deserved far more laughter than it got. I'm sorry, but like that was ridiculous. Like y'all should have other things I would accept it like, oh, that's not funny. Everything's a dad joke. But patoots, that was hilarious. I'm gonna take a drink. I'm just so disappointed. It's Dr. Pepper. It's not anything bad. Bless you.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. Next. The formatting is basically the same for the paper. I say 600 to 800 words on this paper. I really feel like 600 is fine for the other paper, but the best papers tend to float around 800 words, I've noticed on this one. Although I say that in the sample paper, which is the only sample paper I've ever included that got a 100, was only 678 words. But she does it a lot with a very small amount of space. The only time a works cited page will be required is if you're not using the Arguing About Literature textbook or one of the links that I've given you. And if y'all on the last discussion post had trouble reading Good Country People because the link doesn't work, I know that happened to some people, but somebody emailed me about it and I fixed it. So that the Good Country People link, there's now a second one that does work. And if you use that one too, it'll be fine. The only time you need to include a works cited page is if you're not using any of the sources that I provided or the textbook. So if you're using some outside source, you would need to cite that. By the way, later on the research paper, I don't want everybody to just Google your story title and the word citation, MLA, on Google. Because I had students telling me that they didn't read Good Man It's Hard to Find Out of this textbook. They'd read it in Flannery O'Connor's Selected Stories published in 1956. And I was like, where the hell did you get a copy of that? And they're like, oh, I just Googled citation. And I was like, well, don't do that. Now you're saying you read it from a 50s copy of the book when you really didn't, and I'm freaking out. I'm like, these students are going all out buying more expensive copies of these books. And it's just somebody who's lazy. And I don't want you using outside sources for this assignment. I want to see like what you can come up with in this analysis. Really would even prefer even Spark Notes or anything like that. Just kind of like, what do you see and what can you come up with? I always feel like this is so much more interesting to read for me than people who've gone out and found articles. When we get to the research paper, that's what that's supposed to be about. But here and now, I'm just less interested in it. Let's see. Now, what I'm grading on, and usually I kind of roll over the grading section because it kind of has the same stuff each time, but not so much in this one. It's a little tougher than the evaluation census because it has you really focus closely on something. And you'll be graded on your ability to A, use critical thinking to view the reading from as many perspectives and possibilities as is appropriate to a selection of that size. So it's almost like when they talk to you in school about like webbing, and you would think about all the stuff you could regarding a topic, and you draw a circle around it and have all these branches that come off. You're kind of doing that with the words of the selection you choose. You're thinking like, what all possible meanings could each one of these words in my selection have, and what could I make stick? What works? It just requires you to think about a number of different perspectives and possibilities all simultaneously. So that's one of the big difficult things. You want to analyze all possibilities for the author's choice of diction and phrasing, like what seems to make the most sense, like of the 4 different possibilities that could be there, which one of these seems to be the most plausible based on the rest of what I'm reading in the text. It just requires a lot of thought to put this argument together. And you're going to try to find a wealth of meaning for the entire reading that this one small selection reveals through such a critical analysis, as mentioned before. I want you to speak about necessary plot elements without ever summarizing the entire plot, and of course satisfy the length. And try to come up with an original idea. Don't just regurgitate things I've said in class. I am easily bored, very easily bored, and it takes longer to grade boring papers. So if you come up with ideas, you think, wow, that's interesting. Like I'm going to put that down. Like I'll be like, oh, I've never heard that before. That's cool, and I flow right through it. But when you tell me symbolism. Like, if I hear something, literally the worst is if I hear something that I've said in class spouted back to me, I'm like, I know that before, I've thought it. So like, I want you to come up with like the original things that you can think of, and like, I'm all about like if you can make a case for it, if you sound like confident about it, don't say like, well, I think and I believe, but like this is this way and this is this way. Look at the evidence it shows, and I'm like, wow, yeah. I don't know why the face I just made and like the reaction I had, I stole subconsciously from Michael Scott on The Office. Remember the episode where he's like, you know exactly the one I'm talking about, like the face I did? It was like, he was like, Mr. Scott, will you be the godfather of my child? And he was like, yeah, wow. Didn't work out. We had to let him go. But like, I don't know, it was a great episode. If you didn't watch The Office, I'm sorry. Is anybody actually going to get that NBC app? Oh, this is brilliant. Do you know what NBC has done on purpose? Did you know that I think Comcast owns NBC? Did you know this? Like they work together, Comcast, NBC, and I think maybe even Warner Brothers. But it's like some super conglomerate. You know, like the thing that they talked about, antitrust policies and like the government stuff we have. It's kind of like flying in the face of that. Because it's like they own everything. But they have a huge, like basically they took Friends off Netflix, you know, and The Office is going to come too. The Office is going to go away as well. So there'll be no Office and no Friends on Netflix. They're going to put it on the NBC Universal app, which I think they're going to have a free version where you can watch it all you want as long as there's ads. What they're hoping, this is so weird, this is the opposite of every other streamer strategy. They own cable, right? They want people to use cable. And so what they're trying to do is create tons and tons of apps and be a part of that people have to pay for separately. So they get so irritated that they come back to cable. They say, if we annoy people enough to get off streaming and they come to cable, it makes us happy. If we get people to pay for our streaming service where they won't have to have the ads, it makes us happy. Basically, no matter what, them pulling Friends and Office from Netflix was a brilliant decision for them. When I was reading the article, and I was like, damn it, they're right. Because all it's going to do is make streaming more annoying, which helps them. And if they do pay for their streaming, that helps them. Like, there's no way that it's a win-win them taking the Friends and The Office back. So stupid. It's never coming back to Netflix, guys. I'm telling you right now. Calling it never. So if you're like, I'll hold out on this Netflix thing because one day it'll come, it's not coming. It's not coming. They realize people love the crap out of that crap. Me included. The crap out of that crap. English teacher, guys. Great vocabulary. So don't just tell me what I want to hear, because that's where we were going with that. And I think it's best to go onto the sample essay now and just kind of read it, show you what it's about, what the kind of things are that I'm looking for, what I find interesting. I'm looking for interesting observations about humanity and about the literature that take some creative thought to come up with. It's not just something that's obvious. It's not just, like if you were to watch, has anybody seen the movie Pulp Fiction? This is a terrible example. Pulp Fiction back in the day was a briefcase where like nobody sees what's in the briefcase. It's just a light. If you were to say that, I think the briefcase is a symbol for something. I mean, obviously, it doesn't show us even what's in it. It's so obvious. So that was a terrible example. Forget what I said. Nothing happened. Let's just talk about the sample essay. It's so much better. So the sentence is, only Miss Emily's house was left, lifting its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps and eyesore among eyesores. I'm going to give you the full reaction that I had when I was reading this essay. So number one reaction I had was, I don't think that sentence is in there. I was like, I don't remember that sentence. Everybody was choosing obvious sentences that I'd heard before and that I knew, and this person chose something I didn't even recognize. So my first reaction, it actually shows like sometimes the best papers will have the highest level of risk, because here I was like, is that in there? And I went over to like this other like file, and I was like, what was the sentence? Most original word in that sentence. Coquettish. Let me look for that in this document. Coquettish. Oh wait, the second paragraph. And now I don't know that that's the actual version of the story. I was just using that to find the sentence. I'm actually gonna look that up in my real version of the story, and of my book. So I'm like, okay, let me check them. Let me check it out. See if this is really here. If it's some like fake version. Second paragraph. But garages and cotton gins had encroached and obliterated even the august names of that neighborhood. Only Miss Emily's house was left, leaving its stubborn and coquettish decay above the cotton wagons and the gasoline pumps, an eyesore among eyesores. Though there is a small error that she's made here. It's supposed to say, and the gasoline pumps. It's close enough. The doesn't change the meaning that much. So, I mean, it's there. Okay. I still don't know really why it's chosen. It seems kind of nondescript to me. Doesn't seem like it's spouting the theme of the story out to me like a lot of the people choose. They'll they'll pick like, she'd have been a good woman if had been inspired to shoot her every day of her life. So boom, theme, punch me in the face with it. This one's like, I don't even know what this is. I don't know what this is. So little risk here because I go in kind of skeptical. But I read the first paragraph. And it says, from the very beginning of his short story, Faulkner alludes to the emphasis on the symbolism of the house and its owner, as well as foreshadows what will happen later on in the story. Faulkner does all of this through a small description depicting a part of the story's setting. This simple sentence introduces why the house Miss Emily occupies is one of the most important symbols throughout the story. And I kind of mentioned earlier, but everybody's thesis will basically be exactly the same, just with... And I mean kind of implied thesis. You might not have a stated thesis that's exactly the same, but the implications of your thesis are the same, which are that your selection from the story is important to the story for these reasons. And you'll all follow that sort of format. In this case, she's saying that this sentence is important because it alludes to the symbolism of the house, the symbolism of Emily. It foreshadows what's going to happen later. It messes with setting, and it's a very, very important symbol in the story. So symbolism, foreshadowing, setting. That's the things it's important for. And I guess it's going to relate to theme in some way too. I just don't know how yet. And I'm like, okay, all right. Sounds like it's going to be competent enough. If you need help with like literary terminology and looking for things that help apply to your story, I'm going to show you all how to do this next week or how I would do it. But, oh, no, I'm already there. I have this right underneath the assignment. You can see there's this critical analysis literary terminology for use file, and it's this. And I just have like, I used to spend time every single week. We'd do PowerPoints, and I would go through the PowerPoints and we'd talk about literary terminology. And students begged me to stop doing it. So it was boring. Please let's discuss literature in class like we did that one day. And I was like, okay. And people seemed a lot more interested, so that's what we do now. We mostly spend the class in this semester discussing literature. It's most fun when we get to poetry because people can see the poetry, read it, then we can talk about it and we can see the whole thing in its context. But at this time, it's still pretty okay. But we would go over all this literary terminology, and I found that a lot of the students, half the students had gone over this to exhaustion when they were in high school. The other half had never heard of any of these terms. So I just try to have these with like a brief definition, just enough to understand what it is. And if you wanted to do that, you could take this whole document here, backspace the definitions in the Word format, and you could put your own like story, like kind of analyze each element for your story. Like, is the exposition really important to my story? Is rising action, what happens in my story? Climax, what's the climax of my story? And really just go through and catalog everything about your story so that you could see, are there certain elements that do stick out, and is there a quote from the story that I could apply to a lot of those elements? It's a kind of a backwards way of doing it where it's truly not backwards. It's like truly putting a lot of forethought into it instead of just picking something and hoping that it sticks. But you don't have to feel the pressure to do that. I'm not grading you on whether you've done that. I'm just grading you on the final product. So if you want to do that, go ahead. If not, up to you. And I'll actually show like a sample of me doing that over the course of next week and the next. So I'm okay with this so far. I'm reading it. I'm like, sounds like she's going to do a competent job. I'm thinking we're on the way to a 95 here. Well, maybe a 90 or an 85. I mean, I don't know if it's good enough to be like a 95 yet. I'd see something that kind of makes me go, there we go. That's what I'm looking for. But I haven't quite seen that yet. So let's see how she argues. In the words preceding the chosen phrase above, the environment around the house is described. Okay. It's especially important to notice how the description of the atmosphere around the house is new and progressive, whereas the house itself is a complete contrast to the ideal. Okay. Simply put, the house does not fit into the surroundings. I think I see where she's going with this. It does not belong with the ambiance of the cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. The house sticks out in what most people in the town would be agreed to be a displeasing way. She's basically saying like the house is like the house in Up, where we only like the house in Up because it's got the balloons. If we were like, there's this old house, and then there's like these buildings around, it doesn't fit in at all. It just kind of looks weird. You know, we would tend to think, oh, we want something to be kind of uniform and like match. And the whole town is progressing gasoline pumps and stuff, but her house is just this old, decrepit mansion type house that's amongst all this new and progressive stuff. You know, it'd be like taking the shopping center over there with Academy and like right in that open space where you can drive a car, putting like some old mansion, like just like unpainted, you know, kind of like it wouldn't make any sense. It needs to fit in. So you're saying the house does not fit in. Everything around it's new and progressive. And I really like, and I want everybody to do this on their paper, everybody, where you're quoting the part from your quote that represents what you're talking about. She's being very direct about, see, cotton wagons and gasoline pumps. That's what I mean by what I'm talking about, the new and progressive atmosphere. A lot of students don't do. They forget that. They put a quote at the top and then never really reference it throughout the paper, and those people get bad grades. But if you put the quote at the top and you're talking about the quote, but you just forget to quote specific parts of it, that's okay, but really the people who do the best on this paper are the ones that are constantly quoting back to that quote. They're using words that are like signal phrases from it. In cotton wagons and gasoline pumps, that's from her quote above. That is a strategy I would like people to use. That's what I think you could take from the sample essay, is doing that. A lot of times people will want to take my sample essays as templates that you just fill in the blank for your stuff. What I don't want to see you guys do is this. See this first paragraph? Soldier's Home is a story about a guy named Krebs who's come back from the war, and he's kind of lost motivation. He just spends time at his house, not really trying to assimilate with people again. He's just sort of like affected by what he went through being in World War I, okay? And I'll have students write this. From the very beginning of his short story, Hemingway alludes to the emphasis on the symbolism of the house and its owner, as well as foreshadows what will happen later on in the story. Hemingway does all of this through a small description depicting a part of the story's setting. This simple sentence introduces why the house Krebs occupies as one of the most important symbols throughout the story. So they'll just take the existing paragraph and switch out their words, because they're like, hey, I know another story about a house. I just use the same paragraph and switch out my words. Do not do that. This is not a Mad Lib. You know, it's not. You're not filling in the blank This is supposed to be a guide for like how you should approach it, the kinds of things you should talk about, not an exact template word for word that you should use. So what I do want you using is this is sort of an example, not as a template. Like you shouldn't just fill in the blank with your own stuff. And you might not even end up talking about foreshadowing or symbolism or setting. Like those might not enter into yours. You might stick purely with character and tone. It's totally going to be different for everybody. But use this as sort of a guide for competent way to approach it. So I've got the industrial surroundings and the old surroundings for the house. Like, so the house is old, everything is surrounding it's new and progressive. So I'm like, that's pretty good so far. You seem like you're doing a good job of looking at the story and analyzing what's in it. And then next paragraph. The house represents Miss Emily herself. Sorry, you know, I've realized over time, you know, I make that weird noise where like it goes like when I'm drinking. Did you hear that? I've realized over time why I do that. A long time ago, I would take a drink of my drink, and it was very awkward because people would look up at me like, why is he not talking? And so like I come up with like a little aural indicator midway through my sip that I'm drinking, and everybody's like, what's that noise? And so everybody looks up when I tell them to, not just some random awkward moment of why is it silent, you know? It's like I'm in control of the looking, not everybody. Otherwise it doesn't feel so awkward. But now I've talked about it, now it just makes it more awkward. The house represents Miss Emily herself. She is seen as an outcast in her town, specifically in the time period where most young women were out getting married and starting families, because she is known as being a recluse. To the townspeople, Miss Emily is seen as an eyesore. She's doing it again. See, calling back to the word. She's an eyesore. It's up in the quote. As most people would conclude, eyesores tend to be popular topics of discussion. Okay. This is ironic given that though the townspeople would rather personally ignore exceptions to their social ideals, it is in their nature to publicly confer about it, thus giving Miss Emily's seemingly insignificant way of living an even greater significance. It does not help that they already set themselves apart from her because of her family's history of being in a higher social status. See, that's an interesting point. So it's like the town has its way of thinking about people generally. Emily is sort of an exception to that ideal. But this weird thing we do as people is, and this is like true of like, I mean, almost every single like high school movie from the 90s was built upon this premise, where the different kid gets talked about. You know, they're different. It's not like they get completely ignored and like nobody even thinks they exist. They become an example for what we don't do, and being that example, you talk about them more. So Emily, it's like, oh, don't be like Emily. Look at her. She's way different. But it means that you talk about that person more. They become a popular topic of discussion. I honestly think that that is one of the reasons that Trump won the presidency, is everybody kept talking about Trump all the time, like, yeah, but look at him. He's way different. And they kept talking about him, right? The news kept talking about the guy. They were like, Trump, he can't be president, Trump. So his name was all that was on anybody's lips. And because he was constantly being mentioned, because he was the only thing people heard about, he's the one that got elected. It's almost like the media is sort of using an opposite strategy this time with Bernie Sanders, because literally Bernie Sanders was winning a poll in a state, and they listed the word, like, they put him under the category of other. Like, the poll didn't have Bernie's name included, but other ended up being the biggest category that was voted for in the poll. And so when they announced it on the news, they were like, you can see Warren and Biden and blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't say Sanders' name. It didn't matter. Like they could not say his name because they were like afraid that he was going to win, because he's very anti-business. When I say anti-business, I don't mean anti-business like people having small businesses. He's very pro-small business. People getting money to start their own like, you know, stores and shops and things. He's anti like corporate business. And all the media companies are owned, all the news companies are owned by corporate media like things. So people always like to talk about the corporate media, like the liberal media, you know, we talk about that all the time. Really, it's corporate liberal media. So if it's not pro-corporate, so they don't want to mention Bernie's name because he would want to break up the media and like maybe start even a public media where like it would hold people accountable and report the news again. And They don't like that. They want to be like, we want to always be click driven, and facts aren't. We can display whatever facts we want. But similar nature is that Bernie Sanders is thought about by other liberals as being like the eyesore. He stands out, and every time they say that he's different, it seems like his poll numbers go up, because the more you talk about how somebody isn't what you want them to be, it puts them more in the spotlight, which means you talk about them more, which means they become more popular. It's really weird, the way that happened with Trump, and it's sort of kind of happening with Sanders a little bit, except the media sort of learned their lesson with Trump. Although honestly, it's been great for the media, I would think, with Trump, because their taxes go down, they can spend more money on stuff, and it's actually fine. So she's sort of an eyesore, but she becomes accepted because people talk about her. Like if she suddenly went away, they'd have to find somebody else to talk about, Imagine being like, there's 5 rich kids in a school and they talk about the poor kids. But imagine like all those rich kids, like the districts are redrawn. Now they're the poor kids in a new richer district. So now they're the ones that get talked about, and like and so the 4 friends now talk about their poorest friend. And so one of the friends who used to be part of the accepted, once there are no people that they can insult, one of those people becomes the new person to insult. So you honestly want to have somebody who's outside of your society that you can talk about, so that you don't become the object of discrimination. It's a weird sort of thing that people do. They form little societies. But anyways, all this thinking is what sort of happened in the span of like 30 to 45 seconds inside my head when I was grading this paper, and I was like, and so I was like very happy with this, and I went, I'm going to say 95 right now. It's secured. No matter what, I think out of 95, unless you screw it up, because I was impressed with this. And she continues on with this idea because she finds it kind of neat. The house is stubborn and coquettish. Loving this quoting. Description is how the town views Miss Emily. Even though they know she's a nice girl of significant upbringing and background, her solitary lifestyle is not a common one at the time. And because she has shown no signs of changing it, they assume she's obstinate in living that way. Her reclusive behavior then becomes an almost accepted part of the society, if only because it provides something to talk about. Just as the house stands out amongst its industrial surroundings, the people cannot change it, so instead they find entertainment at its expense. They especially find pleasure in the fact that without her father around to keep her a well-rounded young lady, she has brought her family's name down from its status, very much like how the house was once a regal portion of the neighborhood and now stands as a blemish to the town. I feel like this is something that happens a lot these days. If I had to think about a town relationship, probably the easiest one I can think of, the students that I hear laugh the most about their own town are the Quinlan students. Because I have a whole class of Quinlan dual credit students, and they always talk about, the meth problem in Quinlan. Hilarious. And they just talk about how funny that is. It's almost like, though people probably don't want meth smokers in their town, and just in general. Don't want people wandering around with no teeth, like on Breaking Bad.
But without them, there's nothing to talk about.
Right. It's like you take something that's not an accepted part of your society and you find entertainment at its expense. I was actually impressed with how long it took for it to be okay to make Kobe Bryant jokes after he died. Because he just died, right? But usually it's like the next day people are starting to make fun of stuff online. But it took many days, and like the country was like in mourning, and I finally saw, I think it was this morning, I saw a tweet. Some guy said, my mom mourned for 3 days over Kobe Bryant, and she never came to one of my basketball games. You saw that? And then like the mom replied, and she said, well, you ain't Kobe, LOL. Or like, you don't play like Kobe. And I was just like, okay, now we're finally starting to heal from it. So it's like, usually humor is the way in which we heal from things in America, especially these days with the internet and how you can quip off something real quick, take something that's tragic and turn it into humor quickly, because it's one of the ways in which we heal. But in this case, they're finding pleasure at the expense of like this woman who obviously doesn't fit in. And almost in the story, she doesn't mention this, but this is kind of where my mind took it too. The humor is sort of used as a way to distract you from what's really going on, this, death that comes to the later of the story, like what she did, what? And you're like, this is actually some kooky old lady. So they use like the humor as expense to like make the story work out, because it doesn't work if you're looking directly at it and thinking it's coming, If she's just painted as like this seriously messed up lady, then it's a horror film, not a dark comedy, Speaking of dark comedies, Parasite, you guys. Have I told y'all the 2 films I think you all should see?
Yeah.
Parasite, Marriage Story. It's hard not to talk about Parasite. So good. That Parasite is so good that like Vudu, I got a notification that Vudu had it available now in early access. Where I don't know if you know this, but Vudu is owned by Walmart now, or they work in cahoots. So you can like a lot of people don't use Vudu. We do because I finally got to the point where time is the most important thing in the world to me. And if I have to drive to a Redbox to rent a movie to bring it home and it might not work and I gotta go back, or if I forget to bring it back and then it charges me the money because I forgot to bring it back, and the disc doesn't work, or I've got to now be thinking about, hey, I've got to get there. We got to watch this damn thing by 9 p.m. F Redbox. I hate the damn thing. So Vudu though is like, it's gonna be $5.99 to watch this in HD, and I'm like, it's worth it. It's totally worth it. Like, I used to think people were crazy for renting movies for $5.99, but now I'm like, that's amazing. And so because I use Vudu, I also find out about things like it does this early access thing where you can watch a movie that really you shouldn't be able to watch yet, but if you buy the Blu-ray in advance, it's like you do a pre-order of the Blu-ray, it then gives you immediate Vudu access, and then the Blu-ray will come to you whenever. Like, it might even take a month or 2 for the Blu-ray to come, but you've got the Vudu access. It doesn't really matter because it's so much easier now to stream stuff than it is to like. And I buy a Blu-ray. My wife's like, "Well, we have the Blu-ray," and I'm like, ugh. It's just I'm so used to Netflix now and like Disney Plus. It's like I don't want to get up. Like wait for previews and click yes on a menu and have it not listen to me. It's like, what? You want to skip the what? What? No, I want to skip the preview. Huh? I can't hear you. We're going to show you all the previews. And I'm like, I've seen this movie. I've seen that movie. I've seen this other movie. I've seen the third movie. And then you finally you get to watch the movie you want to watch. Whereas Vudu, I'm just like, click, watch, go. And it takes like 30 seconds. And so I waste like 5 to 10 minutes of my day trying to get the damn Blu-ray to work when I could just watch the movie immediately and I save time. But I love that movie so much that I paid for the Blu-ray in advance. I was like, I want it. So it's coming to my house eventually. But I've got the Vudu now. Cut that whole story out because it's useless. You don't have to cut it out. I mean, we did waste time though. So next, she's an accepted part of the town, like that. Now, although the word decay seems to be an insignificant part of the sentence, upon further inspection, it becomes very striking. At this point, I was like, wait a second, decay. I think I know where she's going with this. It's brilliant. If she's going where I think she's going, she's going to get a really good grade. The story ends with the revealing of the rotting corpse of Miss Emily's ex-fiancé, her sick personal keepsake of her lover. She is going where I think she's going. The decay is like foreshadowing for the dead body at the end. And it happens in paragraph 2. I scared myself. You see, I blinked. Brilliant. Like, it sets. Okay, let's see. What does she say? After reading the end of the story and going back to the phrase describing the house, readers can find that there was obviously more to it than just not fitting in. The decay in the sentence not only displays that it was an old house on the outside, but also represents what will literally be inside the house, a decaying body. Dun dun dun. In going with the symbolism of the house, it could also represent that Emily herself had decay, which would be her obviously corrupted mind for thinking it was acceptable to poison someone to death to be able to keep them forever. Stop, it's too much. Honestly, like she had me at foreshadowing the dead body, and then she's like in mental decay, and like she's messed up in the head. I'm like, stop! I'm already impressed. She hit me 2 impressive ideas. One is that eyesores are bad, yes, but we often will talk about them. We find entertainments at their expense. They almost become an accepted part of society because of the fact that we think of us like that's something we can talk about. You know, like it was that one time at the Emmys, like the Kardashians got up there and they said, our family is intimately knowledgeable about the real drama that can come from real human interactions between families, and everybody in the crowd laughed at them. But it's like, honestly, I can't think of a month in my life when I go without thinking about the Kardashians and how I'm so glad I'm not them.
What?
But then they become an accepted part of society because of how much I want not to be them. And I say all this, and Kim Kardashian, I've read lately, she's been doing some good. She's been going and helping people get off of like people who are wrongly accused of crime. She's been helping them get off and putting a lot of effort into that. I've been really impressed with that, actually. And it's pissing me off. Because I can't just not like somebody who's doing good. Pisses me off. You may find it really weird that Seth MacFarlane donated a lot of money to the, like, Australia fire. Like, you know, the Irwin family's like zoo thing. And I was like, really, that's the one you choose? Like, it was very interesting that was the one thing he went with. Maybe because they made a joke about Steve Irwin one time on their show. And they were like, I feel I owe you. Let's see. By the way, Seth MacFarlane is the guy who created Family Guy, in case you weren't the other one. So, very impressed. Probably will have a high 9,900 at the end of this, depending on how well it goes. Irony is that Miss Emily was ostracized for being different, but the way people thought she was different turned out to be relatively normal compared to the reality of what she was like. Faulkner designed the phrase, only Miss Emily's house was left, ... an eyesore among eyesores. I think that's honestly what sold it to 100, was that little tiny touch. Didn't repeat the entire sentence again. Told me, you know the sentence, ... Just said, here's the beginning, here's the end, you know the rest. I was like, I do know the rest. Now that you've made it so important to me forever. To perfectly represent how Miss Emily's house and herself are tied together, both literally from her living in it and symbolically by the way the house is snubbed by the people of the town, as well as the stubborn and decay aspects both the house and Emily possessed. She's kind of cramming a whole lot into the conclusion there, but I think she felt like she had to, and she's like, oh, I got to say all that stuff again, but shorter. Like, how do I do that? Which I forgave that a little bit, but I gave it 100, only 678 words. But she gave me two amazing things I wasn't expecting. And just doing a competent analysis where you're pointing out what's there and like it's, I mean, like if she was to have said, if she was to just write a paper about how Emily is like the house and that it's an eyesore and it stands out in the town and the decay is like the decay of the house and that's all she did, that would be good enough for like a 95. But she took it to those just little extra like levels where decay of like the mind and like the decaying body in the house and like it's not just that the house is an eyesore, but that eyesores become accepted because we talk about them. It was all very impressive to me. And so that's how you would get, I think, an A on this paper, is just trying to think of things that people might not normally think of. Now, if you do a poem, if you decide to go ahead and do a poem, you're like, well, I can just skip ahead in the class and do a poem because the poems are shorter and I can read those faster. Thing is, I want you to pick a very small selection of a work, right? So a sentence from a short story is fine, but in a poem, a small selection is going to be pretty small. You couldn't pick like 4 lines of a 14-line poem like a sonnet. That's 30%. Like that's a significant portion. If you were to do like a sonnet, you would want to do like a single word. Like if I was to do like Robert Frost, The Road Not Taken, which is a 20-line poem, and one we're all pretty familiar with, at least we've heard of before. Shall I compare thee to us? No, that's a different poem. It's like 2 roads diverged in yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. And at the very end, it's like 2 roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by. That's made all the difference. Like we all know that ending. But if I were to do that poem, the very last stanza has, and I shall be saying this with a sigh, someday ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverged in the wood, and I took the one less traveled by. It's made all the difference. I would probably choose the word sigh. And that would be the word that I would do for the whole essay. Just that one word. And I would feel like it would be kind of lame if somebody chose road. I was like, I think the roads are important to are they? The whole thing's about roads. But if I chose sigh, and I can talk about the different meanings of the sigh and what the sigh could mean, or even just like the word diverged, like, because that makes me think of Divergent, the movie. That would not work. But like diverge into different ways I could do that. But if you do a poem, it increases the difficulty because now you're writing an essay about a word instead of a sentence. And you really have to get creative to do that. So that's the essay. Now we can talk about literature. Is there any questions about this? I will say that over the course of the next week, maybe the week after that, I'm going to have a little short story called Popular Mechanics. It's like a page long that we'll analyze in terms of its literary elements, and I will show you like the prep work I would do if I were to write an essay over that. And I actually may write the essay over that this semester because I already did that once with 1301. This is one of the harder ones for people in 1302, so I might write it if I have the time, which I don't, but I might because it's more interesting to do than do attendance. I got to do attendance anyway, but it's just interesting. It'd be interesting to do. So we could talk now about the remaining literature to talk about, and we're going to have to be fairly quick with it. So I have kind of some guiding questions to make it go a little quicker. By the way, next week they're all fairly. Oh, am I go on battery? My screen got dark. Is my screen heating? Is it getting too hot? Why does my screen sometimes do it? It just goes dark. It goes like dims. It's very strange. Nobody knows. So the next week's stories are not that long or hard, I don't think. Though Paper Menagerie may make you cry. Just be aware of that. Whoa. Oh, that's what. Oh, you see? Can you see it? You can't, can you? When I highlight the schedule, that's when it turns gray. I was always wondering why that was happening. It's not my screen turning dark. It's the web. So much better. So Good Man is hard to find. We've already talked about pretty exhaustively. But Battle Royal and Good Country People we have not. And I kind of mentioned the other day that Good Country People is the story that I find to be the most tragic of the three stories. Battle Royal I find to be the most messed up of the three stories. Even though I feel like it ends on a more hopeful note and there is some direction he can go. Was there anything specific you guys want to talk about with Battle Royal? Okay, so I'll go. I have things. My question is, a lot of people mention this in the discussion post, so I'll go ahead and ask the question. People were wondering why he would agree to do the Battle Royale in the first place. Like, why would he do the Battle Royal? Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because it's gonna suck. He doesn't seem to be especially like into it. Why does he do it? All he's really there to do is his speech. That's all he wants.
Is it to please the people who are watching the fight?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, I would say so.
Because if they see him fighting and then doing his speech about it, and seeing how dedicated he is to them, it would probably like please them, basically.
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah, I would say so. And it shows them. I think I know why they want to do it. Like, he's gonna give a speech, and so he's obviously like a smart guy. But they're gonna have him participate in this battle royal because they can. Like, it's like one of those power things. Like, we can make you do this, so we're going to. I think the same reason that some reason they had Naked Lady. That was when I got really uncomfortable. It's most of, like, when I start getting most uncomfortable is when Naked Lady's up there doing her little Naked Lady dance, and they've got all these young guys and they're talking about how they're experiencing physical changes, and you're just like, wow, this is awkward. This is super awkward, and I feel bad, and I kind of want to save them all from this, but then they all end up doing the fight, and they're fighting over the money on the electric mat, and it's not even real money. It's just pieces of junk. Whole lot of just racist crap happening. And then like it just is so strange that he would agree to do this in the first place. But I think it's kind of like when somebody kind of has the power to like make those sorts of decisions. Sometimes you just go along with it. Like, and honestly, I think that he wants to please them, so he does say yes. The other thing that people are really confused about in the story, I think, is what it means at the beginning of the story when the grandpa says what he says, and what it means at the end of the story when he has that dream. Like, what the hell is going on there? Do I know? I feel like you know? You what?
I have to reread it.
Have to reread it. It's diff because you get to the end and you're like, what the hell just happened? On the dream?
I forgot about this.
I feel like at the end, the grandpa was more like mocking the child
Mhm.
or the man.
Mhm.
That he was like still being controlled, and that they're keeping him running basically.
Yes. Yeah, I would say so. That's I agree. I have a pretty, I think, because a lot of people like maybe you like get it on like that level of like here's what the story is saying, but like I think it's important to recognize when like the beginning of the story when the grandpa says that thing, it's a deathbed statement kind of, it's like it's one of the last things he's saying, and so you're like, what the hell's grandpa saying? Like my nice grandpa is saying like you got to fight the fight, live with your head in the lion's mouth. Like what? What is he talking about? And then like he dies, and then like you see like he's ended up living his life where he's wanting to write the nice speech, he's willing to do a battle royal. I don't see from this character's perspective many negative thoughts about the people he's doing this for. I mean, he says the word equality and backs off of it, right? He's like, oh, I'm not bad. That's oops, that was a mistake. And then we see the dream at the end where it's like, the scholarship is not really, it's like paper after paper, and the last one says like, or like the envelope after envelope, and then like keep that boy running. And you can tell like there's a part of him that he feels guilty about not fulfilling his grandpa's legacy. But I think it's similar to what happens to a lot of people in if like your family didn't come from America but they've moved here. And I feel like this is the most common I've seen this happen is with people from Asia. Because there's not a lot of people around here. It's less common with people who are from like Mexico. Because when you come here from Mexico, there's still a lot of people in Texas that speak Spanish. But like if you come from like Vietnam or like there's not a lot of people who here speak Vietnamese. So you kind of got to learn to speak English fairly quickly. But like when you come here with a family and like they have an existing culture and they just want to come to America for the extra opportunity. But they're like, you have to keep all of your culture. That's what you have to do. You have to make our culture survive here. But you're in America now, and there's English, and there's movies, and there's video games. There's all this fun stuff, and like there's democracy, which maybe your other country didn't have, or other things that are going on that we have that they didn't have, or like there's less crime rates or something. And you come here, and America just seems so nice. And even if it's not nice, it's what you're surrounded by. So Grandpa lived his whole life, but never let the kid in on the secret. He was like, we're living with your head in the lion's mouth. He's like, what, Dad? I just thought we lived here and we liked it. Like, Grandpa, I'm like, what? We're just nice people. No, we're not. We're nice. We're subversive. Huh? No, this is us. We're just nice people. No, we're going to fight them back. We're going to get them. Huh? Like, he's just so confused. And it's like, and parents are shocked when their kids don't remember their family's language. Like, you've lost it? You don't know Spanish? I don't really use it. Yes, you do at home all the time. Yeah, with you guys, but then y'all started speaking English around us whenever you can, and so it's like we don't really know our like this happens so often, and parents are often really shocked by it. Like, well, why have you forgotten our culture? Well, I was never really taught it, and the culture I'm surrounded by was easier to pick up. I turn on television. There's the other culture. I go to school. There's the other culture. Like, well, how am I supposed to retain mine? The only way would be to homeschool. And the whole reason you brought me here in the first place is so I could get more opportunities. It's hard to maintain a hold in that culture. So I think kind of what's happening too here is the grandpa is like, this is what we're doing. We're gonna get them. One day we're gonna be the dominant race. We're gonna be there and be all of a sudden, hey, we're here. Like, oh crap, we didn't see this coming. But never told that to his grandson really, except that one time. Instead of it becoming a way of life, it's a thing he said once. And so he's like, I like this culture. I can move up by being good. I get scholarships. This is great. And he's all like on the side of the white guys, rich white guys. He's like, yeah, look at me. I'm succeeding. Yeah, I had to fight some people, but who cares? And there's horrible rampant racism, but I'll get over that. But really what he realizes he thinks he might be turning into is the Samuel L. Jackson character. He's afraid he's turning into the Samuel L. Jackson character from Django Unchained. You ever seen that movie? Will Smith read the script for that movie. Tarantino gave it to him, and he wanted him to be in it. And Will Smith said, I like it, but I was hoping for a change. And this is Quentin Tarantino. He's like, okay. What do you want to change? He says, well, I want to be the one that kills the bad guy. And he says, you are. You kill Samuel L. Jackson, the guy who's selling out the other black people. He says, no, I want to kill Leonardo DiCaprio. I want to kill Monsieur Candy. He's the bad guy. And he's like, he is a bad guy, but the person is willing to sell out their own people's worse than him. And he goes, no. And so Quentin Tarantino was like, thank you for your time. And then Jamie Foxx did it, and it's so amazing. But it's like, the person who sells their own people out to please the other people, that person, I mean, we know people are going to be racist, but if you profit off of racism to hurt your own people who the racism is being against, I mean, that's pretty bad. That's what Tarantino was trying to, I think, get across there. And Jamie Foxx understood and was like, yes, if you sell your own people out, that's worse. And can be, at least. Although racists are still bad. I mean, it's not, there's one that's bad and one that's not. It's like both bad, just one's more bad. At least in that, the premise of that movie. So that's kind of what I think is going on there, is he feels that guilt. He knows he should be trying to do better by his people, but he feels the guilt of like he's assimilated. He feels like he shouldn't based on what his grandpa told him. And then we have Good Country People, which I think is the sadder of the two. Because I really feel like at the end of that story, the Battle Royal, while it's messed up, there's hope. He feels like he sees in that dream like that he has something he could work on. Good Country People is just really damn tragic. Like, it's just sad. That's all it is. A lot of times students have asked me, like, why does the story spend like the first half of it almost, it feels like, from talking about the mom and like her mom's worker. Like, why does it spend all that time there and only barely gets to Holga, and then all of a sudden we're in Holga's perspective basically the rest of the story? I think it's working on establishing for us this, good country people. That's just good country people. That's who they are. We're seeing like Mrs. Hopewell. She's a good country mama, wants to do good by her daughter. And then we have good country lady lives next door, who she's a gossip. She's got to always seem right, but she's just good country people. It's setting them up like they're kind of doltish, Mama's a little more with it than the other lady who always has to seem right, but they're just kind of like these country folk. And then we meet Holga, and she's hard and cold, and I mean, her freaking name was Joy Hopewell. Did you realize that? Changes her name to Holga just to seem worse. And she's the kind of person that, she pushes people away. She's like, I got my PhD in philosophy. And then she's constantly quoting philosophy, and Mom's like, I think she's possessed. You could tell she's just like, what is she even saying? And her whole identity is wrapped up in being smarter than everybody, right? So then the Christian Bible salesman pops up. She's like, I'm smarter than this kid. And you know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to seduce this kid. At first, she's like, she does not seem like a seductress, but still, I'm going to seduce this kid. And I'm going to take his virginity, because I'm sure she's a virgin because he's a Christian. Take his virginity. And she's like, I am too, but whatevs. I'm going to take his virginity, and I'm going to show him his Christian belief system doesn't mean anything to him, because he's willing to fornicate and throw it all away. I'm going to do that. And I'll show him that atheism is superior and that he's an idiot. So she takes him up there, and like they start having a talk, and like he like says, let's go out to this pretty barn. And, like they go out to the barn, like go up to the loft, and she's like, climb up to the loft. He's like, yeah, it's pretty up there. They go up to the loft, and like they're having a conversation. He's very like interested in like the leg, and like where does the leg connect? And there's the part of the story, where is Good Country People? It's like it's online, so I gotta read it online. So there's this part of the story where he's asking about the leg, and he says, can you show me where it connects? And she says, no. And he says, no, you're just playing me for a sucker. She says, oh, no. It joins at the knee, only at the knee. I mean, why do you want to see it? And he says, well, because it's what makes you different. You ain't like nobody else. And then this is where the story gets really sad. If you miss this paragraph, it's very important. It says, she sat staring at him. There was nothing about her face or her round, freezing blue eyes to indicate that this had moved her, but she felt as if her heart had stopped and left her mind to pump her blood. She decided that for the first time in her life, she was face to face with real innocence. This boy with an instinct that came from beyond wisdom had touched the truth about her. When after a minute she said in a hoarse, high voice, all right. It was like surrendering to him completely. It was like losing her own life and finding it again miraculously in his. It's a long way of saying essentially like she feels accepted and loved for who she is finally by somebody. Everybody wants to change her. Mom says, don't be the way you are. And like she got their legs shot off when she was a kid, so she's got this wooden leg, and she's built a wall around herself all this time, and finally there's somebody who's willing to accept her for who she is, and she's going to let him in, right? And over the course of the next 2 pages, finds out, he's got like, alcohol and naked lady cards, and he takes her glasses, and so she can't see, and turns out that he's taken an eye from some lady once before, and she's getting increasingly upset. She said, aren't you just good country people? He's like, yeah, but it ain't held me back none. I'm as good as you any day in the week. Give me my leg. Come on now, let's begin to have us a good time. We ain't got to know one another good yet. Give me my leg. What's the matter with you all of a sudden? You just a while ago said you didn't believe in nothing. I thought you was some girl. Like she's saying like she was an atheist. And he's like, you don't believe in nothing. I mean, you don't have those Christian holdups. She's like, you're a Christian. You're a fine Christian. You're just like them all. Say one thing and do another. You're a perfect Christian. He says, I hope you don't think I believe in that crap. I may sell Bibles. I know which end is up. And I ain't born yesterday. I know where I'm going. Give me my leg. And he says, one time I got a woman's glass eye this way. You didn't think I'd catch me because Pointer ain't really my name. I use a different name every house I call at and don't stay nowhere long. I'll tell you another thing, Helga. You ain't so smart. I believe in nothing ever since I was born. And he runs off with her leg. So at the end of the story, she's left at the top of a barn, and she got to climb down a ladder with one leg. I'm assuming hop or crawl across a field, which I only recently thought about, all the way back home. The most shameful walk probably of her life. Her whole identity was wrapped in being smarter than everybody and believing in nothing, and that got her everywhere. But this little young Christian Bible salesman kid showed her that not only is she not that smart, but she can be outsmarted by the dumbest of people, and so could everybody in the story. There is no real good country people. And not only that, but this guy she thought she was going to seduce and lose her virginity to. I mean, you could call it other things. She was going to seduce him, and that's messed up. But she was going to lose her virginity to the guy. That was what she decided. Instead of him really, like she thought at that one moment in the story, really deciding he knew who she was and liked her the way she was and wanted her for who she was, the only thing he really cared about was the one part of her that wasn't actually her. You'll have a great weekend. It's always fun to leave on that super sad, tragic note. Always beware Bible salesmen. Who sells Bibles? Pretty Bibles. These days, nobody really has to worry about that.